we hesitating? Barron told us to get law. This is law.
Barron told us to get the system. We need the full scope. That's the only thing that will put an end to this.
Last month, when Spotlight won Best Picture at the Oscars, it became one of 6 movies to win Best Picture, along with only one other Oscar. The most recent example was 63 years ago, with The Greatest Show on Earth. Before that, there are a few from the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, however there are significantly fewer categories. So, let's look at what that means. The biggest thing about Spotlight is that it's an example of a movie where rather unremarkable factors add up to be a great movie. What I mean is that every aspect of the movie is good, don't get me wrong, but really none are really that great. The writing is very good, the acting is good, but the characters really have only 1 or 2 moments when they can really stand out. Besides that, they're giving realistic performances of real people. The same can be said about the cinematography. It certainly isn't bad, but it isn't flashy, and that defines the entire movie. It is there to tell a story, and it does that phenomenally, which reflects it winning screenplay and picture. However, let's contrast that to the 2014 Oscars when we saw 12 Years a Slave win Best Picture. However, it was Gravity that took home the most Oscars with 7. But when we look at Gravity, it is almost the exact opposite of Spotlight. It's 100% style. It's essentially 90 minutes of Ryan Stone, played by Sandra Bullock, trying to get from point A to point B to point C. There is no major plot development, you just see a very basic story. This is the movie that shines in 2 lights. The first is the Understory. As we are told, Ryan lost her daughter, and this is a movie about her accepting this loss. This film's tagline is, "Don't let go." However, this is a movie about her letting go of the death of her daughter and joining the rest of civilization. However, dissecting Gravity is not the primary focus of this video. The other great aspect of this movie is how impressive it is visually. From the incredible opening shot to the precise sound mixing, sound editing.
Ready to receive.
Houston, elaborate. Debris from the missile strike has caused a chain reaction.
The editing in general, cinematography, shot compensation, and of course the score. The film is a technical masterpiece, yet when it comes to story, it's somewhat lackluster. Now there's nothing wrong with that, it's obvious Alfonso Cuarón made the movie he wanted to make, and had a lot of success with it. The same can be said for Spotlight. Tom McCarthy, the director, really tried to remain unbiased when making this film. There really isn't a director's signature on it. He simply gives us unbiased storytelling. Despite these movies being nearly opposites, I like both of them quite a bit. That isn't to say I don't have my problems with them. But they're both 2 movies that I would call good, and I might go so far as to call Spotlight great. And although I really like both of these movies, I wish they had a little bit more of either stylization or storytelling. Usually the movies I love the most are the ones with a compelling story, but also with the director's signature style. One of the best examples of a director who has such a great blend of story and style is Christopher Nolan. I have my fair share of complaints with some of his movies, but there is no denying that he is a great storyteller. My favorite movie of his is Memento. And one of the biggest reasons why I love that movie so much is that he made stylistic decisions that made his story better. The big one that everyone brings up is that he tells the story in reverse order, but there's so much more than that. There's his use of black and white, flashbacks, and reverse timing. This is certainly a very stylized movie, but it fits the high level of story. Throughout the entire movie, the audience doesn't know what's happening. There are constant new developments in the story and new advancements, so this extremely stylized movie is met with another extreme in terms of storytelling. However, when Christopher Nolan's stories go down a notch, as does his stylization. Let's look to The Dark Knight. It certainly doesn't have a basic plot. There are a lot of advancements that happen and things are constantly changing. However, when you compare it to the story of Memento, it certainly isn't as complex. And the same can be said about stylization. There's certainly some style in the movie, and on a technical level the film is superb, but again, it's a step down from Memento. What Nolan does so well to help tell his stories is have a similar level of style and a similar level of story. Another example of a filmmaker, or in this case filmmakers who do this so well, is the Coen Brothers. With very few exceptions, visually none of their movies are that unique. The Man Who Wasn't There is shot in black and white, and movies like Oh Brother, Where Art Thou and Inside Llewyn Davis have a unique washed out look. But for the most part, visually their movies are pretty standard. They always have excellent cinematography, and the editing is great. But the real style of a Coen Brothers movie comes from the dialogue in their screenplay.
I went to Normandale for about a year and a half.
Yeah, that's where we met.
But I dropped out, though.
Yeah, she dropped.
Yeah.
They are writers known for their unique dialogue.
Have you ever heard of Vietnam?
Oh, for
You're
Christ's
entering a
sake,
world of
Walter.
pain, son. We know that this is your homework.
And that is where most of their style comes from. Naturally, this is also where their stories come from. So this leads from one to supplement the other. So as we see their stories get more and more out there, we also see their style ramp up as well. But when they make a movie like True Grit, which is generally accepted as their most universally accessible movie, you can see a major step down in terms of style. You could show it to a group of 5th graders, have them all like, to a group of college students, have them all like it, or to a group of senior citizens and have them all like it. Meanwhile, if you show The Big Lebowski to a group of 5th graders, well, they certainly wouldn't like it as much. If we look back at the history of cinema, we can see that it took decades before we got any real style involved. The earliest examples of filmmaking had directors limiting themselves to a simple rectangle to show off their stories. It looked more like a recorded play than a movie that we know today. Looking back at every movie made before the 1930s, we saw simple shots with no real depth or movement. Even when sound was introduced, it took directors years to use it for more than anything besides dialogue. The biggest influence on who changed both of these was German director Fritz Lang. Metropolis showed very creative uses of the camera and cinematography. Meanwhile, it was M who took full advantage of sound. After that, pioneers like Orson Welles and Alfred Hitchcock took steps into bringing it into the modern world. There are countless examples of directors who tell great stories and put their mark all over it. At the same time, there are some who tell stories from a distance, and from that spawned the countless phenomenal movies of Francis Ford Coppola, who did this perfectly. The tones and themes from The Godfather are totally different from The Conversation, which again is totally different from Apocalypse Now. Even though all these movies have a style to them, they're all unique. They're all there to help tell a story. Later on in his career, Coppola focused more on bringing his own mark and his own style to the table, which is reflected in Twist and Tetra. At the end of the day, there certainly isn't a right or a wrong way to have a balance between style and story. Going back to Spotlight, you could argue that McCarthy's style was trying to be subtle. He wasn't going for a big set piece. He was trying to tell a story exactly as it happened, almost like a documentary, and he did a pretty great job with that. So whether your movie is City of God, Life of Pi, Sin City, or Jaws, all movies have their style and use it to tell their own story. Next time you watch a movie, look at how the director balances these two elements to either make the movie the best it can be, or make it too over the top. Leave a comment and tell me which movie you thought used this balance perfectly. Drop a like if you enjoyed and subscribe, or you can join me next time. If you're looking for something to watch next, the video on the left is going to take you to my video dissecting Love in Her. On the right is going to be my analysis and dissection of Jurassic Park. Until then, thanks for watching.